Now to start with, I'd like to go through and give you a little bit of a background on how Aternity collects information and how data shows up on the dashboard. Aternity is an agent-based technology. In other words, we have a very small, lightweight agent that deploys out to the end user's device. In other words, right where the end user interacts with their critical business applications. Aternity has the ability to provide visibility into mobile applications, iOS and Android apps, virtual desktops such as Citrix Zen Desktop and Zen App or VDI sessions. Aternity also has the ability to provide visibility into physical desktops like laptops and desktops. All this information is collected at the endpoint and brought up to a data warehouse, if you will, where information is collected for presentation in the here and now, and also allows access to historical data for being able to do historical studies over long periods of time. Now, for the purposes of this demo, I'm going to start out showing the last 24 hours of data. I could focus in my time frame into something more narrow, like the last 60 minutes, or pick a custom time period to maybe look at performance last Friday or last Monday or the week before that or the quarter before that or even over an entire year to understand historically how performance has trended over time. Now, what I see on the screen right now is the enterprise dashboard, which is giving me a view of my entire enterprise. I see users in various geographic locations with the dots indicating larger dots being where I have more transactions coming in or smaller dots where I have less transactions with users interacting with applications. I also have a listing of all of the business critical applications that my end users are using. Now, each application has an indication of the number of unique users that are using those applications. So in this particular case, I can see I have 35 unique users using the agency mission critical application. I can also see to the right of that a bar that indicates how much time the user has spent actively interacting with that application. So in other words, not the time that it's minimized down to the taskbar, but the time the user is actually interacting. To the right of that, I have an indication of what we call the UXI, or User Experience Index. This is a number between 0 and 5, where 5 is the absolute best end user experience and 0 being the absolute worst. The User Experience Index is a number that indicates to me what is the satisfaction level of the end users using these applications. So in this case, Agency Mission Critical has a User Experience Index of 4. Now, what goes into this User Experience Index is metrics like how much did the end user use the application. Of that time the user used the application, how much time was spent waiting on it? Or how many times did the application crash or hang? Or various things that can impact end user experience. In this particular case, I can see the end users waited about 9.4% of the overall time that they've used Agency Mission Critical. I can also see that there were 53 crashes, again, in the last 24 hours. So these are the things that can impact User Experience Index. Down below, I have the ability to break out performance by different entities such as department, business locations, regions, browsers, different operating systems, or different device types. Now, if I wanted to focus in on a specific business location, I could do that by selecting business location and a location such as Coronado. When I click on Coronado, all the information on the screen is updated to indicate the performance specifically at the Coronado location. If I were to click on another location, like Fort Carson, again, it focuses on the performance at that particular geolocation called Fort Carson. Now, at this point, what I'd like to do is go through some typical workflows that show how an analyst would use Aternity in their day-to-day work life. The first workflow I'd like to show is more of a reactive workflow. In other words, where an end user may call us expecting us to have the answers to why they're having performance issues. Now, historically, we may not have had all the bits of information to be able to give them much guidance. In this particular case, we're going to use Aternity to give us information, to get us a better understanding of what's happening with our user Adam. So as I type Adam's name, I can see, oh, his name is Adam Covert. And while I have Adam on the phone, I ask Adam, what type of machine are you using? Are you using virtual desktop? Are you using a physical desktop? So Adam lets me know I'm on a physical desktop, and the machine name is SSGWS05. So drilling into that particular machine for Adam, I have the ability to understand a lot of different things about it. For instance, what operating system is Adam using? Is he connected via Wi-Fi, or is he connected via a LAN? In this case, he's connected to a LAN. I can see the stability index, not so good, 3.2, and the red dot is telling me that Adam's workstation is not so stable. There's crashes and other things that may be impacting Adam's ability to be able to have a good experience in using his applications. I can see when he last booted, what hardware is he using, and I can see which department Adam is a member of. Below that, I have an indication of Adam's CPU and memory utilization over the time period. So in this case, in the last 6 hours, I can see Adam's CPU and physical RAM and Adam's virtual RAM. Below that, I can see the utilization of Adam's disk, indicating whether or not there's performance issues in queuing going on that may impact Adam's ability to have good performance on his workstation. In the middle right, I have an indication of what were the top processes that were running during the time period that I'm looking at. I see Trusted Installer is running as administrator, and it's consuming about half of his CPU utilization on his machine. So this is something that can very well impact performance of his critical business applications. Even though Adam may not know that Trusted Installer is running in the background, it most definitely is impacting his performance. Below that, I have an indication of what applications Adam is using at the time. Now, Adam is calling in specifically about the agency mission critical application. I can see the number of interactions that he's had with agency mission critical over the last 6 hours, and an indication, the red dot, showing me that his performance with that is unacceptable based upon historical performance. So in other words, we've been watching Adam interact with agency mission critical every day for the past number of weeks, and have come up with an idea of what's normal and abnormal specifically for Adam at the Coronado business location. So the red dot is telling us this isn't what Adam typically sees. So this isn't a case of perceived slowness. We really do have a case where Adam is having poor performance. He's also using Project Tracker, where he's not receiving the greatest performance, but not too bad, and Agency Portal, which he is getting acceptable performance for all the rest of the applications he's running at the time. Below that, I can see Adam's latency information. So in other words, is he having a problem even getting connected to the agency mission critical application, because he might be experiencing very high latency. So I can see that over time to understand if that's playing into this particular issue. Now, since Adam is calling in specifically about his application performance, what I'd like to do is drill into the user experience dashboard. And what that's going to do is give me an indication of the applications Adam's using and exactly when. So in other words, on February 20th at 3:24 p.m., he used the OneDrive application. And I can see in OneDrive, he opened an account. I can also see he's using another application, Agency Mission Critical, which happens to be the one he's calling in about. I can see he's receiving poor performance. This 10.61 seconds essentially means he's went into Agency Mission Critical, he's typed something in the dialog box or search record, hit enter, and 10.61 seconds later, he receives his response back from that application. The orange dot indicates that that is not within the norm of what Adam sees based upon historical performance. And I can see exactly when he executed it at 3:16 and 31 seconds. Now I have the ability here to drill down into this further. So what I'd like to do is let's focus in on just agency mission critical. So by clicking on that application, now all the results you see are honed down into all the different interactions with agency mission critical. Now looking at this a different way, As a distribution chart, I can see he does a number of different things in this application, such as save record, he logs in, he loads details, but his problem seems to be largely focused on search record. I can see each one of these dots on a time scale shows me how long an execution of search record took. And I can see all of these are outside the realm of normal. So what I'd like to do at this point is drill into this further to get a better idea where exactly is the problem. When I hover my mouse over, I still can see, even at this point, that particular interaction, how much time was spent on the server, 7.78 seconds. How much time was spent on the network, 100 milliseconds. How much time was spent on the client, 4.37 seconds. So in this particular instance, most of the time was spent on the back-end server. So now I'm going to troubleshoot this to get some more information about where this time is being spent and maybe what are some of my possible problems. Now, up at the top, I can see I'm troubleshooting agency mission critical, search record across my entire user community. So, just to get an idea, is this specifically an Atom problem, or is this something that may be impacting a much larger portion of my end user environment? On average, it takes 5.89 seconds for a search record transaction to complete. Atom's seeing somewhere around 11 seconds. So on average, this is much faster than what Atom's seeing. But as I look down into business locations, I can see I have some problematic locations. These top two locations, actually the top two locations are receiving extremely slow performance, whereas the other locations down here at the bottom are receiving acceptable performance. Drilling into that a little bit further, I can see when my end users execute a search record on agency mission critical over the last 6 hours, I can see there are four different servers that respond to that search record request. One of these looks a lot different than the other. I have 3 servers that have very reasonable, acceptable response time, and I can see one of these servers is when users happen to hit this particular server, the response time is much, much higher. The colored bars break out the time into how much time is spent on the server, the back-end server, how much time is spent on the network, or how much time is spent on the client. So we're starting to get down to some root causes on what actually or where actually the problem is. The fact that this blue bar on the left side is longer and my server response time on average represents the majority of the response time, I would probably want to look into what's going on in these back-end servers. So just to remind everyone, Aternity is an end-user experience tool. It focuses on the end-user experience from the point of view of the end-user's device. Aternity is not a server response time tool, and it doesn't troubleshoot server response time. But what we've shown here is that we have a specific back-end server from the point of view of Atom's workstation and everybody else using agency mission critical, that the response time issue seems to be a problem with this server. So I would probably call up the team that is responsible for the back-end server infrastructure for agency mission critical, and I'd be able to provide them a specific server that the problem is occurring on. Now, ideally, we want to be proactive instead of reactive. We'd like to know when we have a problem before a problem actually exists. So to do that, Aternity has a system which we call incidents. Incidents are Eternity's way of reaching out to us and telling us, hey, we have a problem. This red exclamation point up here at the top of the screen tells me I have an outstanding problem right now. The number next to it tells me how many outstanding problems are currently open at this moment. So by clicking on this red exclamation point, I can get into the details of what are the issues that are going on. Now, up here at the top of the list, I see order execution. This is a problem right now. This is something impacting my users at this very moment. Order execution, specifically the map view activity within order execution, is causing my end users pain. I have 2 users that were impacted by this particular problem. So this allows me to assess whether or not the problem is really small, maybe only impacting a couple of users, or maybe the problem is much larger such as this one, where I have 9 users being impacted. This allows me to prioritize and understand which particular problems I should address first. Now, looking down this list, I have one open incident, but I have a number of incidents that have since closed, and a lot of these are agency mission critical. So Adam just called me a couple minutes ago saying about his issue with agency mission critical, but we actually started getting alerts early this morning. At 3:41 a.m., I got an alert for an open incident on agency mission critical, specifically search record, which, by the way, is the problem that Adam was experiencing just a moment ago. Let's drill down into that and get some more details around what's going on. The problem looks like it started at 3:41 a.m. There were 9 users being impacted, and I can see at what point in time how many users were being impacted, and then when the problem eventually subsided. Now, it obviously wasn't fixed because this continued to happen on and off throughout the day, but we could have been ahead of this before Adam even called in and started to look into that server I showed in the prior workflow and had it fixed. So maybe Adam might not even have had to call in at all. We would have had it fixed before Adam even realized it was a problem. This particular issue is not just impacting Adam. It's impacting Claire, Carl, Juanita, Albert, Bessie, Patsy. All of these people are being impacted by this particular issue. So this is something that maybe we should have spent some time earlier this morning addressing. When incidents are opened, we have the ability to send off these incidents to existing trouble ticketing systems, such as help desk ticketing systems, allowing visibility into the problems outside of the realm of people that would specifically use Aternity. Now, my next workflow, I'd like to show more of a what is the impact of change scenario. So in this particular workflow, I'm in the midst of rolling out all my users from physical desktop, using all their applications on physical desktops, to virtualized desktops, such as Citrix Zen App or Citrix Zen App, the Zen Desktop. In this particular workflow, what I'd like to do is I've deployed out a number of test users to the VDI infrastructure just to get an idea on whether or not it's going to be successful or not. So the type of change I'm testing here is my users using their apps on a physical desktop to that on a VDI environment or a virtualized desktop environment. And I specifically want to look at the agency mission critical application and how these two different infrastructures, how the performance is impacted between the two. Now when I hit go, we're going to go and look through that sample set or that test set of users that are deployed on VDI, and let's compare them to the users that are using agency mission critical on a physical desktop. I can see load details. It takes about 1.99 seconds on a desktop. It takes about 2.10 seconds on a physical desktop, so it's a little bit slower on a virtualized desktop. Open options. It takes 2.04 seconds on a physical desktop. It takes 1.94 seconds on a virtual desktop. So this particular function is faster on a virtualized desktop. Breaking it out by different business locations also, we can see that Coronado here received a 62% improvement in end user experience by moving to a virtualized desktop. This allows me to have the data to go to my management and say, okay, this is looking pretty good. We should probably continue to migrate our users over to using their applications, and specifically this, the agency mission critical application, on a virtualized desktop instead of a physical desktop. Down in the bottom right shows me an indication. Over the last 30 days of time, 31% of my end users' interactions to this application were deemed as non-acceptable performance-wise. And again, these are based upon that dynamic baseline we talked about earlier, where Aternity watches the user and it figures out what's normal for these users and what's not normal. So what this is telling me is physical users on the physical desktop are receiving much poorer performance than the users on a virtual desktop. 1.2% of my interactions on a virtual desktop are deemed as non-acceptable. versus the 31% on a physical desktop. In the next workflow, I'd like to show using Aternity in more of a capacity planning or understanding my execution around service level agreements. So Aternity has the ability to monitor real executions against SLA for performance and monitor what each of the different critical business applications are, what are the activities the users use in those applications, what is the average response time for each of these different interactions, the current set threshold, and things like how many activities did we execute against that. So in other words, did my users even use this application? In this case, Project Tracker, my end users executed 8,302 interactions with that application. In comparison, Agency Mission Critical Search Record, we executed that 37,908 times over the last 30 days. So this is a much more important application and function for my end users than, say, Project Tracker. My execution against the SLA was only about 65% of the time. So what that means is when my end users did a search record, 65% of the time, we only hit our SLA 65% of the time for what they expect performance to be for that particular application. And again, we can narrow that down to specific states, specific regions, specific departments to get an understanding of maybe a different location has more of a problem than another location. For instance, Santa Fe, New Mexico. My execution against SLAs overall across my entire application stack is only about 10.2 seconds. So users in Santa Fe are receiving much poorer performance than, say, Jacksonville, Florida, or Iraq, Baghdad. Another way of looking at this is understanding what is the impact of slow applications on the productivity and the bottom line of my company. So we have a dashboard called Costly Activities to be able to show us which applications my end users are using, and similar to the last dashboard, how many activities they've executed over my time period of study. But the new piece of data here is the number of lost hours. So in other words, this is lost productivity due to the end user having to wait on those critical business applications. Right up here at the top of the list is Agency Mission Critical Search Record. I've had 68.14 lost hours over this very small group of users that I have in my particular system here, 64 users. Your environment may be 1,064 or 10,000 users, so or 100,000 users. In those cases, the order of magnitude of the lost productivity in hours, it could be, in the thousands of lost hours and in the hundreds of thousands of dollars of lost productivity that is costly to the company. This allows me to focus on the particular things that are causing my users the most pain and also return more productivity back to my user environment. So that concludes the workflows I'd like to cover in today's demo video. But if you've watched this and you have further questions or would like a deeper drill down demo of Aternity, please contact your sales executive or contact myself, Dennis Kunstman, and we will arrange to set up an interactive live demo for you to be able to interact and be able to ask specific questions during the demo flow. I thank you for your time today, and I look forward to talking to you later. Thank you very much. Have a good day.